How does 40, 50, even 60% company dollar sound to you? Well, we'll be exploring that and some other differences with our special guest today, all the way from France. This is the Philip Gagnon Show.
This is the number one podcast for real estate brokers and leaders. You're listening to the Philip Gagnon Show.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Philip Gagnon Show. I am your host, Philip Gagnon. Today, joining us all the way from Paris, France, we have Mr. Cyril Morel. How are you, Cyril?
Hello, Phil. How are you? Doing very good. Thank you.
Good. Cyril is the Director of Operations and Technology at ERA France. Cyril, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your role and about ERA's position in the market in France.
Okay, yes, with pleasure. I've been with ERA since the last 15 years in France. ERA, the brand number 5 in France, is the position of offices open. Right now, we have more than 400 offices open with 2,000 agents working for us in France. And my job with ERA is to make the network bigger. So I'm in charge of expansion. That means I'm working with 10 salesperson selling franchise sales everywhere in France. And also I have another position in France and I'm in charge of IT. That means I'm working with a team, an IT team in charge of website, CRM, and new technologies here in France.
You said that there was about 2,000 agents and 400 offices. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, Phil.
Okay. So that's interesting because that means that the average agent count per office is a lot lower than here in the US. So that's kind of what we'll talk about today is some of these differences that we find between France and the US. What would you say, because you've done a little bit of stuff in the US and I know you used to work here years ago, what would you say is one of the big differences between working in France and working in the US?
I mean, I can tell you there is few differences. Let's take for example 5 big difference between France and the US. The first one for me, which is obviously the bigger one, is money relationship you've got here in the US.
Money relationship, like the relationship people have with money?
Exactly. In France, let me tell you an example. If you make money, it's better to hide it. You don't have to show it. Otherwise, you are not a good person, which is very different in the US.
So if you show off your money, it's not a good thing?
Exactly. And let me give you an example. When I was working in the US and talking with some agent over there, people told me, oh, if I'm coming in some appointment in my customer houses, it's okay if I'm driving there with a big car. Because if I have a big car, that means I'm making money. If I make money, that means I'm successful. And if I am successful, that means I will be able to sell their home. And in France, if you're driving through a customer house and with a big car, the first reaction people will have, they will tell you, oh, now I understand why your fees are so expensive. That's going to be exactly the first one. And you didn't say anything, they didn't know you, and they will say that because you have to hide it at the very beginning.
So in the US, it's a sign of success, but in France, it means that you charge too much.
Exactly. Maybe you can rob me or there is something wrong with you. I will better call another broker or agent because it will be cheaper than you. Just because you have, a big car. And this is exactly the same for a lot of things in France. That means you have to be discreet.
So why is that? Why? I mean, that's obviously, from the American mindset, which I can share. The American mindset is, well, if you're successful and you drive a big fancy car, then obviously you're going to be able to help me and you're going to help me get the most money from my house. Why is it so different in France? What is the French mindset around that?
It's a cultural thing. Because since a lot of time people making money used to be people driving the world, and that was not good people. We've got revolution in France, yellow jacket soon, I mean few months ago. So you better hide your money and don't show off a lot. That's cultural things. And
Very
let me tell
interesting.
you another story, which is for me another difference. That's the second difference for me. It's coming through the money. It's about promoting yourself. There is for me a huge difference between France and US about promoting yourself because uh, you in the US it's normal to put yourself out, but yeah, in France for real estate agents they hate to promote themselves and putting themselves forward. Uh, French people value humility.
So, like putting your picture on a business card and having your own website, all of that stuff is not looked upon very highly.
Yeah, exactly. This is too much for us. Oh, you've got your picture on your business card. You can if here in the US. I was driving through some cities, and you can even have your picture in the streets, telling if you want to sell your house, call me, and you have your picture in the street in a very big frame, which usually we don't do that in France, and people will say, oh, that person love himself a lot. He put his picture everywhere in the city.
So it's seen as being egotistical and megalomaniac if you put your picture everywhere.
Exactly, exactly.
So then, well, let me ask you this then: what does that do to the brokerage or to the office? Because if the agents don't put themselves out there, they must be putting the name of the office out there, right?
The name of the office is okay, but the picture is too much.
Okay.
And right. So we train them a lot. We help them a lot with the marketing and everything. So now they get used to put the picture on business card or mailing and things like this. And the step number two right now for us is to help them making videos to talk to sellers and buyers, customers, and we try to train them and to explain them how they have to make videos. People say, first thing we say, oh, you have to make video. Oh, but I hate my face on video. I can't even feel my voice. This
That's
is
the same.
very
It's the same thing here in the U.S.
so we don't tell them, okay, everybody is seeing your face every day and nobody complain. So we try to explain.
I've said that actually. I've told agents that before.
So that's a funny thing. So and now they start making videos because we push them a lot, but this is cultural thing to do not promote yourself too much, like hiding you've got money, thing like this.
So then, how do they market themselves if they don't want to put their face on it, and the names are a challenge? I
uh,
mean, what do they market and how do they market?
the offices,
Okay,
most of the times they market the offices, not the person but the offices. That's the point.
so
But
that
to
would
deal with
mean
a
then.
person, so we train them and we help them. If you are dealing with a person, and usually when a person give you a listing and an exclusive listing because he trusts you, he don't trust the office, he trusts the person he's got in front of him. So we explain that and we tell him the person, the buyer or the seller is buying you, so you have to promote yourself, and then you have to promote the offices as well, but yourself plus the offices.
So it sounds like the communication style is also very different, because there's some things that you can say or can't say. So what is that like?
That means for me is by communication. We can talk about another difference, which is interesting to talk, is going direct to the point. If, I don't know here how you are making business in the US, but the thing I can see when I'm talking with some of agent there, and you don't talk too much. If you start talking with a customer and telling there you must do this and this and this if you want to sell your house, I'm gonna give you an example which is obviously very surprising when you say that, but imagine you are going to do a property evaluation in France, and you can't tell direct thing to your clients like cleaning, storage, ventilation, selling the house before a long time, because if you are going direct to that point, oh, if you want to sell your property, you must clean your garden, you must clean your house, you must storage everything because that's a huge mess here. People are going to say, okay, goodbye. I'm not ready to hear that. But if after 2 or 3 appointments, you try to explain them very carefully, or that will be much better if you clean a little bit here and you store a little bit there, people will be ready to do that, but after a long time. But when I was working in the US, you can go direct to the point. I'm here to help you if you want to sell your house, do this, and this, and I will be able to help you a lot. So the way we drive the relationship is very different. We care a lot of person, and we try to go slowly because we don't want to push the person so much here in France.
So that reminds me of another story of when you and I used to work together, which was, I don't know how many years ago now, probably 7, 8 years ago. We worked together,
Exactly.
and I wrote an email to a broker about something. I think there was an issue, and so I wrote them an email and said, it's this, or I don't even remember what it was, but I'll never forget what the response was, because I tend to be pretty direct, even for an American, and so Americans being more direct than the French. The broker wrote back. I think he wrote back to you actually, and he said, "Yeah, what he said was fine, but he could have at least," referring to me, said what he said was fine, but he could have at least said it with some flowers. And I thought that expression was so funny. And I said, "Said it with flowers. Am I supposed to send flowers when I write an email? What, like?" And then you explained to me, no, no, no. You need to, put some different emotions into it. And you got to kind of ease into it, and you can't be so direct. And I said, okay, all right.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good word you just said. In France, we want emotions. You have to put emotions everywhere, in an email,
Yeah,
on the phone, everywhere in a conversation.
it's
We need emotion here.
it's the language of love. So everything has to have emotions in
This
it,
is it.
emotions and passion and caring.
Exactly.
Oh, that's funny. So obviously these are some cultural differences, but let's talk about business for a second. One of the things that I know that is a big difference between two countries is the listings.
Oh, that's a huge story.
So tell us the story about the listings in France.
So basically, we've got, like you guys, two different kind of listing: open listing and exclusive listing. When you are working in the real estate market here in France, but the difference is about the percentage of exclusive listing and open listing. Here in France, let's take about ERA and the market. In ERA, we've got 40% of our listing are exclusive listing. That means we've got 60% of open listing, which is
So
great.
let's talk about that for a second, because I'm
Yeah.
sure that there's some people that don't know the difference between an open listing and an exclusive listing. So in the US, 98, 99% of every listing is an exclusive listing. But tell us what an open listing is.
An open listing is if you are giving a listing to an agent, if that's an open listing, the seller will put as well the listing in another agency, maybe two, three, five, 10 different other agencies. He can do that, and that's why he's giving open listing, because he want to do it, and he want as well to be able to sell it himself. That's an open listing here.
So an open listing really is just sort of like a commission agreement with the seller. If the seller says, if you bring a buyer, I'll pay you 6%, 7%, 3%, whatever. But anybody else can sell it and you don't get a commission.
Exactly. That's it.
And why do sellers want to do that?
And can you remind me how in the US the percentage of exclusive listing? Do you have open listing in the US, or it's just exclusive?
No, no, I mean, it's really everything is exclusive. It's probably 99.9% is exclusive. It used
Hmm.
to be years ago, back in the 70s and 80s, there was some open listings, but that all has gone away, over the last 30, 40 years.
No, no, now I understand, because for me the why we've got open listing is because since 60 years, you've got the MLS. So in France, we don't have the MLS. We've just created, like 9 years ago, a kind of MLS in France we call AMEP. That means people just start get used. working together, putting the listing together. This is brand new here. And this is why we have open listing, because we just start a kind of MLS here in France.
So you didn't have an MLS until recently.
Exactly. We just start on MLS in 2009.
So then how did you market properties before 2009?
Before, just by ourselves, if an agent got the listing, he promote the listing on the web, on the paper, in mailing, he put in box letter. I mean, this is it. He was alone, and he tried to speak with different agents he knows, telling them, "Oh, I have a new listing. So if you know somebody, this is my new listing," and he give a picture, and that's it. There was no organization.
Was there a lot of cooperation from one office to the next? Like
Not
could
really.
one
Not really.
so if you had a listing, it meant that you or somebody in your office was going to sell it?
Yeah, that's it. So if you are two
And
in the office, you don't have a lot of chance unless you spend a lot of money promoting the listing to sell it.
because that's interesting because, if just with looking at the average, you said 2000 agents, 400 offices, that means there's on average 5 agents per office.
Yeah, that's it. That's correct.
And is that pretty typical?
This is a typical. Yeah, in France, most of the offices got between 3 to 5 agents. With URA, we've got between 5 to 6 right now, and we try to push the offices to hire more and more person.
So if I'm an American broker and I hear an office with 5 agents, that's kind of scary because that means that there's not usually a whole lot of money. Because in the U.S., the average retained commission by the company is about 14%, which means agents are getting 86%. So what is it like in France?
Cool. In France, there is two different things. So most of the listing are open listing first, and then right now we've got the MLS. That means we've got a website when we put the listing in the website to try to sell it. And since we've got the MLS, more and more, people are calling offices to sell their house. Before, we didn't have that, so people try to sell the house by themselves. And since we've got the French MLS, basically right now the statistic is 80% of the sales goes through an office, real estate office in France. Before, it used to be like 10 years ago, before the MLS, it used to be 50%.
Okay. So the percentage of transactions that are being done through a real estate professional is going up, but not a lot.
Now, but 80% right now is very good. 10 years ago, it used to be 50%. So it's
Oh,
much higher.
80%.
Yeah, 80, sorry,
Oh,
80.
80. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. For some reason I thought I heard 60. Okay. So
No,
80%. So that's a
yeah,
lot higher.
yeah, a lot higher.
And that is that because of the MLS, the
That,
MAP?
that's correct. Because of the French MLS MEP. Yes, that's it.
Oh, that's very interesting. So, in talking about commissions for a second,
Yeah.
we talked about having 2,000 agents and 400 offices. It's about 5 agents per office. If I'm an American broker, I hear this and say they're not making a whole lot of money, so that means that the brokers are still selling. Because in the U.S., the average commission retained by the company is about 14%, according to Real Trends. So, what is it in France? How much of the commission does the agent get versus the office?
Oh, in France, that's very different. The average on the market in France is 40% for the agent and 60% for the broker, for the office.
And is that for people that just started or experienced people, or who is that? Who gets 40%?
If everybody, you just
Everybody.
call it, or you've got more experience. This has been like this since a long time in France. But right now, we've got new companies coming. Basically, most of the companies coming in France now are coming from the US, like Keller Williams, Remax. And so the consequence of this is the offices give more commission to the agent because Remax and Keller Williams are coming in some cities.
So, I mean, that's obviously going to have to change, or has it changed the commission structures in the with the offices?
Exact, exact. So if you don't have any Remax or Keller Williams offices next to you, most of the office give 40% for the agent. But if you start having this kind of new companies around you, we give more and more and more commission. This is completely brand new in France. This has been done since just 1 year in France.
Okay, and so are they giving, splits to agents that are similar to KW and Remax and others, or is it that they're just going from 40 to 60%?
I mean, it's going from 40 to 60 and maybe 70s. It's not going through 100% right now. So we are going very slowly and carefully. It's a big change for the broker. But you know what? The reason of this is because in France the average of agent is 5. So if you've got just 5 agents, this is very dangerous to give like 80%, like you've got in the US, 86% of the commission go to the agent, but that's impossible if you've got just 5 person working for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at these numbers, and I know, most offices, really can't start to break even until they hit, maybe 20 agents. And so having five is scary, not only from a revenue standpoint, but also from an attrition standpoint. If you've got
Exactly.
5 agents and you lose one, you just lost 20% of your revenue.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I mean, do agents switch companies a lot? I mean, what does that look like?
Yeah, they switch a lot. So we are hiring all the time. With always a permanent hiring process in all our offices. And since new companies are coming, so since 2 years ago, right now, we just launched a new program called ERA VIP. So with this program, we help person recruiting more agent. So to recruit more agent, we give them specific marketing tools, and we give them more commission and more career evolution. So we set up this program, and we put this program in some offices in France, some offices, some person who are able to manage a lot of person, and some person who's got a lot of spaces. Because usually we've got small offices. Because if you want 30, 40, 100 person, you can have like 50 meter square. I mean,
Which would
I
be
don't know
500 square feet. I mean, that's a tiny office.
exactly, which is the average in France.
Right.
So
And
we
the
have to
rent
change a
must be
lot of
very high
things.
too.
Exactly. So you
Yeah.
need a bigger office, you need new marketing if you want more agent. So that's just started right now in France. So the person we select to be in their program, in this program, ERI VIP, we just right now have something like 20 offices doing this, and we select them. They have to be ready. They have to be ready in marketing. They have to be ready, depending of the offices. They have to be ready with their management as well, because you have to have another management, and maybe you need managers to help you to direct person and to manage person. So that's a lot of changes right now.
So you guys then at the master franchise level say, here's 20 companies that we want to work with, that we want to help grow because we think that they're ready for it and they're set for it. What does the recruiting process look like? What are the things that you're doing to help them recruit, and what are they doing on their own to recruit?
Okay, so we train them to make presentation about their offices and to promote their offices and tools. They are not get used to promote their offices, so we train them a lot, because that's another issue. If you give 60%, maybe tomorrow you give 80%, and after you have to give 100% of the commission, which is not maybe the good way to go. But instead of giving that money, promote your office, give more tools to the agent. And a lot of them, have a lot of tools, but they don't communicate about their tools, their CRM, and all the digital thing they are doing. So if you are a hiring person, you have to promote your office, and we train them to promote their offices.
So I think what you just said is fascinating because this is a huge problem that's happening now in the U.S. Is this reduction of gross margin, gross profit, company dollar, which is now 14%, which is continuing to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And I know of a lot of companies and brokers and managers in the U.S. that think the only way that they can recruit agents is by giving away more and more commission. And so it's becoming sort of a race to the bottom as who's going to have, at some point, there's going to be the totally free brokerage. But in France, you guys are going the opposite direction. I mean, kind of, or at least you're starting from a better place of, 40%. And now the conversation is not, well, am I going to get 80% of the commission? It's now I'm going to get 50. And so you're doing this by having a very strong value and being able to communicate that value, which is fantastic.
Exactly. We don't have any choice.
And I
We,
think
we
it's great that you take the standpoint of saying, well, let's be better about communicating value than let's just give away more commission so we can compete.
Exactly, because that's a competition you can win, because if you give 80%, maybe your company next to you will give 85, and then next month you will have to give 90. And then this is always, a kind of thing you are running after it. So instead of running in this, in this way, you have to take another way, which is promoting your offices.
And being able to communicate what that value is. And obviously, for each brand and each office, that's different, and it's going to be unique. How do you go through that process? I mean, how do you communicate to a broker or to a manager what the value of that office is?
Oh, so basically, we've got business consultants here in France going in their offices and who check everything they've got. Okay, what are you doing on the web? What are you doing on mailing? What are you doing with your CRM, like, text messages, things like this? What kind of picture are you doing? Are you using drone and things like this? So we are doing kind of, we call that an audit here in France. And so it's a huge checklist with like 200 or 300 points to check. And once we've done that checklist, we give the checklist to the manager and tell him, okay, now you have got like 100 points, and on 100 points you are doing, but there is 30 points you have to communicate on it, because your company next to you don't communicate on that point. Maybe they don't have these tools, or maybe they are just, forgetting to communicate on that tools. So that will be a big value for you to do a little brochure or magazine or whatever about tools you are doing, and use that for hiring person.
Okay, so that's a great process right there. So the business consultant comes in, runs through the whole checklist, determines what it is that they're doing, and then says, "Here's what your competition is doing, and here's where you beat the competition." Is that right?
Exactly. That's it.
And then says you need to communicate on what the difference is and why you're better because of these differences.
Exactly.
Um, Now, obviously, let's say somebody is doing all 200 things on the checklist. Do you advise them to communicate on everything or just a few things?
A few things. It's impossible to communicate on 200 things. So on few things, and it's a kind of a regular communication. That means week number one, you communicate, you take 3 points. Week number two, you take three other points. Like this on social media, for example, Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, because we use LinkedIn for hiring person in France a lot here. So you give like 3 points you are doing every week, three tools you are, working with. Like this on all over the here, you've got your hiring communication set up.
So is it about, in looking at the different competitors in the market, is it about having more or is it about being able to communicate on less?
Being able to communicate.
Okay. So
That's
it's
the
more
point.
about, yeah, it's more about understanding what you've got as opposed to having a lot.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's very important because there's so many companies that just think they need more and more and more, but then nobody knows what's even there. Nobody knows what to do with it. Nobody knows how to use it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
First thing, we are going to communicate about things you are doing and you are doing good. because nobody knows you are doing drone or 360 pictures when you've got,
Right.
for example, an exclusive listing.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that's one of the big challenges that I see with companies in the US, not just in real estate, but even outside of real estate, is that they're doing a lot of really great things, but nobody knows about it.
That's it. Same thing
Exactly.
here. That's why we have to train person to do it.
Well, Sorel, I think that's going to be our time for today. Thank you so much for joining us via this international 6 time zone web broadcast here today.
Thank you very much for you, Phil, and for having the time to and giving to me the opportunity to speak with you about these differences.
Hopefully, you found something helpful or insightful in today's episode. If so, I'd ask you if you could please leave a comment or like on Facebook or rate us wherever you may be listening. That would really help me out, and it would help other people like yourself find the show and find these episodes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.
This was the Philip Gagnon Show. Be sure to visit us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Philip Gagnon Show and join in on the conversation, access the show notes, and discover some fantastic bonus content. The Philip Gagnon Show.